Oh, goodness, you guys, it's been quite a week. And introduce our wonderful speaker today.
Do you want me to do it, Sierra?
I would love, Monica, please do it. If you would introduce Steph, I'd appreciate that so much.
Okay. So Steph is someone I've been very blessed to hear through Inc., which is a diversity accelerator. And her words were just so inspiring. I wanted to really share her here. She has a marketing background, an award-winning marketing agency where she had many celebrities. She's been on every syndicated news station, channel, magazine that you can think of. But her work that really touches me is her initiatives on self-love and healing, and how that is really the foundation of our success in our life, the way we move, the way we have relationships. And there's really nobody talking about it at the level that she's talking about it, and in the way she does it, with humor, with sensitivity, with compassion. And as you know, in the news, with so many things happening, that's really disturbing racially, y'all know what's happening. I just think that her words can really inspire us and motivate us and help us to have that relational intelligence to be able to speak in a way that is impactful but meaningful and educational. So Steph, I hope I did you justice here. I can't say enough great things about you, and thank you for being here today.
Can't say good morning. Hello, ladies. Like, I can't say good morning. Yes, I can. It's my world. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I know it's 12:12. It's fine. It's just fine. I want to thank Monica as well as Sierra, but Monica, your words are so very touching. I was like, is she trying to make me ruin my face before I talk to these people? Don't do that. But today is going to be really interesting, as Monica said. I deal a lot with self-love and healing. For me, I'm a multi-certified coach. I deal in healing and intuition and spirituality. And then, of course, in the pragmatic side of things. And what I tell our clients is that no matter where you're trying to go, if it's life, love, business, if it's healing, if it's your health, then all roads lead to healing. You may notice I said healing twice, because our wounds often have wounds. And so once we heal one thing, there's always something else. So always be healing, kind of like always be closing. But anyway, nevertheless, today is going to be about inclusion and how it is not a superpower, or maybe it is. And so it can be argued that the George Floyd assassination, and I don't use that word for color, I use it for the truth, really changed the narrative of police brutality. Now, I think most of us knew that it existed, you know, but to see it in plain sight, and as a caveat, I never saw the video and I never want to, but to see it in plain sight, to see someone have that experience and have a kind of a front row seat, I really believe it changed the narrative, because it changed the visual. It was no longer something that we would just say, oh, well, that happened. Oh, that was so sad, but there had to be something else going on, et cetera, et cetera. No, you saw exactly what was going on. It's right there on video. There you go. So, but beyond changing the narrative and the visual, what it did was change my inbox. And what I mean by that is that I woke up to quite a few questions in my private messages on Facebook, you know, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? And what about this? And what it felt like was there was this uprising, and there was a clamoring and a convergence for change. And though I was in the middle of a million other things, as many of you often are, if you're busy, put busy in the chat. I also like a participatory approach, so I don't do quiet. So you gotta join in. So, you know, if you know that you're busy, put busy in the chat so I know I'm talking to the right people, and so that you'll stay up. All right. But, you know, I was in the middle of doing a lot of things. I was super duper busy. But when the need arose, it really felt like, I think I need to do something with this. All right, Monica, I see you. Thank you so much. So at the end of the day, that was when I decided to create the allyship community and give safe space to learn and unlearn. All right. So that's how that kind of came to be. So that's a little bit of the backstory. Now, what also happened as a result of that was a lot of DEI initiatives. If y'all can relate, just nod your head. A lot of DEI. What is DEI? Well, you know what it is: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's always been there. This is not new. It's not new at all, right? But it started to rise up. You know, a lot of people wanted to be on the right side of history. And so you saw companies say, okay, well, this is what we're doing for diversity. And this is what we're doing. And you know what? We're not going to use master bedroom in the houses anymore. Thanks. You know, as a Black woman, and I always caveat this and say, I am not the voice of Blackness. I am a voice that is having an experience who also happens to be Black, because there is not one singular Black experience. And so I want to make sure that that is the case. Although I have been the voice of Blackness for the majority of my life, with a huge part of my narrative being too Black for the white people and too white for the Black people. So that always put me into an interesting conundrum, which we'll talk about a little bit more maybe later if you want to. So we see the emergence of the DEI, the diversity and equity and inclusion, and it's formal, right? It's organizations saying, this is what we're doing. We're standing with these people. In fact, it's so ironic that we're seeing the same thing right now today, because we're dealing with yet another crisis that's steeped in ethnic identities. And so the challenge with DEI in its formal sense is that it's often performative. Now, I'm not saying that if your company does DEI that they're performing and that they don't mean it, but I'm saying that the formality of it often can be perceived as performative. And often, on the flip side of that, sometimes it actually is. So if you can relate, just put I relate in the comments. We're going to keep it moving. Today's focus, of course, is about inclusion. But before that, I'm going to give you a really quick lesson on diversity. Who wants it? Show of hands. Who wants it? Quick lesson. Okay. Diversity according to me. Stephanie. So what I feel honestly is that I don't have to tell people that diversity exists. And what I do want us to understand as fellow humans. Thank you, Jocelyn. Oh, that's awesome. What I do want us to understand as our fellow humans is that the value of diversity is not in merely seeing it. You know, one of the conversations that came up in the allyship group was when people say, I don't see color. And I'm like, do you understand how polarizing that is? You have to see it. I know what you mean, but you have to see it, because without seeing it, you invalidate a huge part of my identity and my experience. I get it. You don't want to hold it against me. You don't hate me. I get it. It's all biology anyway. We all have melanin. I just have more than most and less than some. So at the end of the day, the value in diversity is not merely just seeing it, but it is seeing it as necessary to bring vision into its truest manifestation. All right. Anybody got vision? Put vision in the comments. I love listen. I love to be interactive. That's just my thing. Kind of like church, sort of. See, McKenzie, hold me down. McKenzie, we're on this thing. And so when I say that, I think about my own team, which is ethnically and generationally and experientially, if you will. And also they're diverse in their goals and what motivates them. And to demonstrate necessity for me, the necessity of needing them and seeing them and knowing that they're integral to bringing my visions to pass or into manifestation it means for me to crawl into the margins. And I hate to tell you this, because I'm going to use the term marginalized a lot, but in the margins, you'll often find the most talented and least accepted individuals for whatever reason. Okay. And hence, and I know that because I've dwelled in the margins most of my life. Now, I do sometimes get access to the main group. Sometimes I get to be the cool kid, hopefully not the mean girl, but you understand what I'm saying. But often I've existed and dwelled in the margins. And if you're wondering who else might be in the margins that might be vital to what you're doing in your business, in your vision, in your venture, consider the angry ones. The antisocial one. Now, let me caveat that and say some people just like their me time. You know, when I worked at the Girl Scouts, everybody always wanted to eat together. I'm like, no, I do not want to eat today again with you. So everybody wanted to eat together. That's how we created community. But, you know, oftentimes think about the labels. You know, if you're a team of two, okay, great. But if you've ever worked in an organization or worked on a committee, think about the ones that seem a little angry. Now, some people are angry, and that's just the truth. But let's find value in that for a minute. Let's find value in the angry ones, the antisocial ones, the assertive, borderline aggressive ones, the unassimilated ones, the ones who are off-brand and different and anti, if you will, the ones with tattoos and piercings and just don't seem to fit in. Well, there's a reason for that. They're in the margins. And they're a wealth of information that can bring vision into manifestation. Now, again, I caveat that some people are just difficult. Okay. But if they're difficult yet dedicated, you just might be able to mine them for the goal, and that is GOLD, that you're seeking in your organization. Anybody interested in gold? I love that, Angie. Angie says, amen. Yes, I do way too many Facebook Lives, so I'm just going to keep going back and forth with the chat. So if you got anything to say, just say it. It makes me happy. But, you know, I think so many times because we don't know how to put certain people in a box. We just don't put them anywhere. You know, our humanity wants to cast them aside and say, well, you know, they're just difficult, you know, whatever. But I'm like, if they're difficult yet dedicated, there could definitely be something there for you. Now, if they're difficult and they're not dedicated, I mean, there could be something there too. But again, crawling into the margins means that you're uncomfortable. And only in that uncomfortability can we actually connect. Anybody like to crawl? I don't like to crawl. That doesn't make me excited. Okay. Like babies crawling, so cute. Adults crawling, no, not going to be able to do it. In fact, I think when I saw I think it's Tough Mudder. Is that the race where you crawl? No, I'm not going to be. I won't tell you what I really said. Actually, I will. I said, that's too much like slavery and I'm free now. And so I'm like legit not doing it. I'm just not. I'm not going to crawl on the ground. It's not happening. Not happening. I won't even flip tires for my trainer. So anyway, so that's kind of my lesson that's my lesson in diversity according to Steph. Okay. All right. So let's get back to the construct of inclusion. I swear we'll always have Tough Mudder and slavery. I know, poor Sierra. I'm so sorry. I'm usually this raw. If I offended someone, I'm so sorry. Oh yay! I'm so happy, McKenzie. We're here for it. We're gonna get matching t-shirts later. Okay, great. So let's dig. So that's the lesson on diversity. Let's dig into a little bit of inclusion. Are there any questions? Anything? Thank you. And I think that's going to be Jean and not Jean. But if it's Jean, is it Jean? Okay, it is Jean. Okay, I was feeling regal. Okay, fine. Okay, so anything on that? Have I offended you yet? Oh, okay, cool. Let's keep going. Let's see if I can do that. No, I'm not trying to offend you. Hopefully, I'm going to equip you with some information that'll help you move forward. So let's talk about inclusion, because in corporate circles, it's always called a seat at the table. And it's so funny because every time I hear that, I'm literally sitting in my formal dining room right now and I'm looking at all the seats, you know, around the table going, interesting. But today, we're not going to talk about it as a seat at the table. Today, we're going to develop inclusion as an act of healing. What? Like yoga? Sort of, but you know, without the downward dog. So ultimately, what we understand as humans is that we crave connection. Part of what's been so challenging about this pandemic is the lack of connection. Would you agree? If you agree, put I agree in the comments. And so, you know, it doesn't take much for us to realize that as human to human, thank you guys so much, that we need to be connected, you know, and we want to be included. Think back to your time on the playground when people were choosing teams. Absolutely. Have you ever been chosen last? I have. That doesn't feel so good, you know. Have you ever been in the lunchroom and have you ever been the cool kid? Or have you wanted to sit at the cool kids table? Either way, you know, we want to be included. You know, I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs would agree with me. And what that says in its most basic sense, at least to me, oh, bless you, Angie, is that we don't need politics and formality in order to make inclusion a part of who we are. Never did sports, McKenzie. I completely get it. Well, I'm choosing you for my team today, and I chose you first, mostly because our names match. Okay, works for me. I'm fine with it. So what we have to understand is that at our base, in the barest essence, right, from the classroom to the lunchroom, and then even in the boardroom, if we wield it well, inclusion actually is a superpower. Well, Stephanie, that's not what you said. We'll get there. Just work with me. And our question should be, well, if we have to wield it well, how do we do that? Well, I'll tell you this, there's a few ways and considerations, but today I'm only going to give you 3 for the sake of time. And those 3 considerations are what I call internal, informal, and intentional. And these are the considerations for me to make inclusion a healing modality all on its own. I think I'm going to introduce a new healing modality today, which I love, which excites me. Okay, got it. All right, so let's get to point 1. Let's talk about the internal consideration, because often, not always, inclusion is external. Remember, we talked about a seat at the table. I'm looking at a table, there are seats around here. And it's what we call IEI. IEI within my practice is what we call an immense external investment. It is our very special, very proprietary term for people pleasing. And it can be that in a corporate context. So it becomes consumer pleasing. It becomes market pleasing, but it's external. Remember, we talked about it possibly being performative or perfunctory just because so many things were happening at that time and people want to be on the right side of history. They don't want to be judged as wrong. And so the internal consideration for me is that without these actions emanating from within, there's an increased possibility of them being, there's this word again, performative. What we want to do is sync the internal and the external. Because one of the challenges that we have in our world, and this is something that I always say, transformation without healing is a recipe for regression. There's a lot of changes that have been made in the wake of George Floyd. There's a lot of changes no one asked for being made in the wake of George Floyd. And it goes back to what I referenced earlier when I said, oh, okay, so we're not going to call the bedroom the master bedroom anymore. Thank you, real estate people. Could you just make sure that I don't have a nervous breakdown if I get pulled over? Could you possibly just make sure that, you know, Black moms and Black dads don't have to have the talk with their sons and daughters about what happens when you get pulled over? You can say master all you want. I will not be offended. But there's a lot of things that happen that we just did not ask for in the wake of that. And I think that happens a lot of times when any of the minority, any of the marginalized groups are highlighted, everybody rushes out to do something. Like, let me show you our something. Don't you see our something? Do you see it? Do you see it? You know, we live in cancel culture now. They have canceled Pepe Le Pew, but they haven't canceled Harvey Weinstein. Anyway, so internal questions, because I'm a coach, I like to ask questions. And from what I hear, my questions can be a little heavy. So what I will do is I'm going to ask them per section. So this is our internal question. And when you ponder it, you don't have to give the answer, but when you're done, just put done in the comments, okay? So here's our internal question for today. Our internal consideration question, that's a mouthful. How is my understanding of inclusion demonstrated in my personal ethos, my personal pathos, and my personal logos? Of course, ethos being ethics, pathos being emotions and experiences, and logos being logic. So how is my understanding of inclusion? Because if we're still saying that it's a seat at the table, thank you, Jean. Yeah, absolutely. You know, if we're still saying it's a seat at the table, okay. Well, what does that really look like, and which table is it? These are just the questions that I have to ask. This was I was pressed to ask. So let's move on, because I want to have time for questions, and I could keep this party going, but I want you all to have time for questions, because I feel like that's where we sync this thing up, and I feel good about that. So that's the internal consideration, aligning what we're doing and allowing it to emanate from within. But again, not having to be formal. I'm going to continue to press that point, not having to be formal, not having to be political, not needing a policy or a governance or a checkbox, but at its barest essence, understanding that humans want to be included, and that we all have the capabilities of bringing someone in from the margins. Point 2, and it brings a perfect segue, the informal consideration. Inclusion is informal. And as I said earlier, there are no politics or policy required. We see that because of the need to perform for the masses. We see that because, gosh, we just want to do the right thing as a company. And many of you are heads of companies, or you're involved in companies who may have done this. Absolutely. I love this. And so I'm looking and I'm going back and forth. And so for me, though, again, going back to that lunchroom playground type of scenario, the informality of inviting Jane, and Jane is just an archetype, inviting Jane to lunch, seeing her sitting over in a corner, knowing that she eats alone every day, you know, asking her if she wants to come and sit with you. Now, Jane might say no, and that's okay. This might be Jane's downtime. She might be meditating. This might be what she does. But inviting Jane to lunch is just as powerful as Netflix deciding to have a Black Lives section on its platform. It's just as powerful. You're like, well, how? Because you did it. We crave connection. We've already established that. And oftentimes inclusion must be, and actually most 99.99999% of the time, inclusion must be relational and not merely organizational. This allows that human-to-human connection, which brings value into what we're doing. It brings knowledge into what we're doing. It becomes a personal thing. When it just simply remains an organizational thing, again, we run the risk of missing the mark. So that leads me to our next question. Have I relied on policies to determine how I see inclusion? Have I relied on corporate policies to determine how I see inclusion? Feel free to think about it. I'm going to drop over here to some of these comments. Organic connection instead of performative. Absolutely, we do not do performative allyship. We're not here for it. But there was a lot of that going on. Hey, look, this is what we did. And I'm like, we didn't ask for this. We didn't ask for this. But because it's organizational and not relational, that shifts the capability for it to be truly effective. So the third thing, let's do a recap real quick. We have internal, informal, and lastly, that brings us to intentional. The intentional consideration of inclusion is when we take up the mantle to speak truth to power, wait for it, and peers. Because speaking to peers will change. I know, Beverly, I know, right? Yeah. No memes and t-shirts. I know. When we speak to our peers, that's when dynamics shift. There's a lot of individuals in our allyship community who have lost relationships with friends, with family members, with people they thought were really on the same page with them. And what I encouraged them to do was to grieve. because they had no clue. You know, there was a time I went to I've often gone to, in the last few years, I went to predominantly white churches for whatever reason. I felt kind of sent there. But the last stop was a Southern Baptist church. And it was an older population. Many of the members looked at me kind of like, okay, well, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm here. Thank you so much. And it's so interesting because I would bring things to people's attention and they couldn't accept it. You know, there was one pastor in particular, he had been there for quite some time. I think there was a building named after him or whatever. And I was like, he never acknowledges my presence. Oh, well, maybe he didn't see you. Now, at the time, I was probably about 240 pounds. And usually the only fly in the buttermilk, some of y'all know what that means. I was hard to miss. Okay. So it wasn't like I was like in a corner. I wasn't, and actually that might've been around 260-ish. So I'm just saying, you couldn't just like miss me. Like, oh, I didn't see her. Like, no, I'm not a Dairy Queen in a small town. You know, if you just drive and don't look, you'll miss it. I'm not that. And so I thought it was really interesting that my peers, allegedly, my peers didn't see what I saw. And that really led me to recognize that in the grand scheme of things, if all of your friends are of a particular people group, you may not know how they react to other people groups until you're told. And so in the intentionality, in the intentional consideration of inclusion, we're not just speaking truth to power, but we're speaking truth to peers because of what has been revealed in relationship. So I'm going back to my archetype of Jane. And I'm not saying that we tell all of Jane's business and we put it into a memo and we pass it. Well, Jane told me. No, what we're saying now is that Jane has brought some things to our attention because Jane was kind enough to let us bask in her energy and to share with us. And now we see that there are some things that we didn't notice before. Now we know why maybe Jane eats alone. Now we know why she avoids certain people. And those were the same people calling her difficult or antisocial. You now know that. And so now your eyes are being opened. And this brings us into advocacy and allyship. That's what it brings us into. Because one of the things, and it was so interesting, you know, I used to post like a daily question in the group because I wanted to know where people were. You know, I didn't want to assumptively just start throwing things at them. And one of the things that the questions that I was asking was about racism. Do you know what racism is? And the response was a resounding yes. And I don't hate anyone. Good job. How about this? Racism is not just about hate. It is about the capability to oppress another group based on whatever criteria for the sake of this, we'll just say their ethnicity. And you can oppress them economically, socially, and politically, and even educationally. That has very little to do with hate and more to do with power. So I love that you don't hate anybody because of the color of their skin. But it's not enough to be non-racist. We have to be anti-racist. There's a book to that end. And if I hadn't have thought about it, some of you have read that, How Not to Be Anti-Racist. I'm sure you have, or you've seen it. I can't remember who the author is. If somebody can remember, drop it in the chat. But it was so interesting to me that was the definition. And so we would go on to talk about a few things. And one of the things that we talked about was something called white saviorship. Have you heard of that? If you've heard of white savior, put that in the comments, say yeah. Okay. And white savior, the white savior complex, okay, thanks, McKenzie, the white savior paradigm, the white savior construct, whatever, you know, titling you want to put to it, is what happens when the desire to include is organizational and not relational. See, this is why we got to crawl into the margins and talk to Jane or to John or to whomever. Like, this is why. Thank you. I had Kendi in my head, but I couldn't remember his first name. So yeah, it is in so many movies. Dangerous Minds, the substitute. I'm giving my age. It is a narrative, like it is. Yeah, I'm telling my age. I am a child of the 80s. Yes, I am. And so in that, the challenge of the white savior complex is that, oh, these poor people, they need this. Let's go give them this. White people. Oh yeah, the blind side. And the blind side is not even as true. The blind side is not even true. I mean, it's not even as true as they're trying to make it out to be. But why is that? Well, it's because we're not forming relationship. We're not asking, we're just performing. We're trying to please the populace versus pleasing the people that we serve. And I'm huge on servitude, right? And so we can avert the white savior complex, construct, paradigm by being in relationship. We can avert that by asking, what do you need? Not assuming we know what you do. One of the biggest challenges, and you see this a lot, of course, people want to go on mission trips and go over here, and it's like, oh, those poor people, they need this, this, and this. And it's like, well, do they though? Is that what they really need? On our video, on our website, there's a video, there's a website. At the end of this all, I was like, you know what? I'm going to put these resources on a website because I wasn't going to teach. It is not incumbent upon me to teach individuals how to not be racist. So what we did was we created a website, and I began to curate what I called Learn List. And so if you go to goodallyship.com, then there's Learn List. And on that, there is a video, I think it's a TED Talk, and I can't remember her name, but it talks about, the white savior complex, because you don't want to do that either. And the thing of it is that when that occurs, it usually doesn't come from a bad place. It's not malicious. It's just uninformed. But again, something that we can write or avert in relationship, intentional relationship, informal relationship. So let's get to the intentional question. Are my beliefs, and this might be a hard one, I'm going to, fair warning. Are my beliefs regarding inclusion and racism aligned with my public and private actions? Are my beliefs regarding inclusion and racism aligned with my public and my private actions? And if you ponder that for a minute, feel free to put done in the comments. We're going to keep moving because there is a bonus point. Oh, I'm wearing a black turtleneck. I can do my Steve Jobs. There's something else. It's called the consideration of being invertible. I had a girlfriend that used to take pole dancing classes. And if you know anything about pole dancing, it's an amazing workout for your core. And there's so much strength that is necessary. And so she eventually learned how to invert. And that, of course, is exactly what it sounds like. She turns herself over. She turns it over on her head. And for me, inclusion, like I said, inclusion is often defined as a seat at the table. But when we invert it, this is what can possibly occur. And what can possibly occur is an even greater consideration because it is giving the opportunity for those in the margins to lead their own table. It is where the balance of power and authority converge. And here's the kicker. If we were to do it well, oh, I'm so glad, Jocelyn, all the tables would be equally valued. Now we look over that lunchroom, and though we have the cool kids, all the kids are the cool kids. They're just cool in different ways. And that is so valuable. It's not fair for the cool kids to be more valuable than the geeks. Because let's be clear, the geeks make more money at the end of the day. We already know that. I am team nerd or team blurred, depending on how you want to call it. So here is your invertible question, because again, this is when we are truly aligned and we start to turn that thing on its head. No poll needed by in case you were wondering. You don't need a poll to do this. You just got to turn the whole thing on its head. So here's your invertible question. What role might I play in supporting someone to build or lead their own table? And so, ladies, in conclusion, inclusion is not and is a superpower. See, we're going to bring it on home now. It is not because we can all do it. It is because of the power that it holds. Ultimately, it does not require formality in politics or policies to be effective or even exist. What it does require is an intrinsic realization and valuation of the wealth and wisdom in the margins, revering the experience and the expertise from the margins, and relentlessly calling out in solidarity and sincerity to the margins. That means you gotta crawl, you gotta call and you gotta crawl. These are actions, my dears. But ultimately, we want to see this culminating with an ardent desire to offer a seat at the table first, and later the chance to build and lead their own table, which is just as valued as the one they were originally invited to. So once again, my name is Stephanie D McKenzie, and I thank you so much for loving and learning and possibly unlearning with me. Are there any questions?
Stephanie, that was incredible. We have not had specific questions coming in yet, but I invite anyone to unmute. Jean.
Yes. There you go.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this beyond, because this is exactly the conversation I have with myself and others, is that this is not about a system. This is other than our own systems, and each and every one of us sharing that. What I want to know is, have you been involved with Leadership Austin?
I have not. I am in Houston, and I moved from Austin in my late 20s.
Okay, there is a Leadership Houston too. I would love to see about your, yeah, I want to talk with you about that, because it's connecting with a group that has influence far and wide and is doing a lot in education for the whole community in diversity and inclusion, and this is part of the conversation. So
Cool.
and the other thing is that I'd love to have you as a speaker for Leadership Austin. So if you'll, just give me your contact information. Thank you.
I will do it.
So much.
Thank you
for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Any questions? Let's see.
Yep.
Yes.
I was just going to say, what I love about your talks always is that it always begins with the individual and an inventory of ourselves first before we start taking action, because it does look performative, feels performative, and then you're confused. But if you're very much in yourself and you've healed a lot of your own things, is where the authenticity and the ability to connect is a lot more authentic. So I so appreciate that reminder today. In the way only you can say it.
Aw, you're too kind. Thank you so much. I love some of these comments over here. Yes. Yes, Beverly. Yes, I replied to that one. Yes. Y'all are so awesome. Let's see, who is this? Jocelyn said, this is exactly what I needed to hear. I've been struggling with this for months. Okay, wonderful. Hope that helps. Oh, yay. As a coach, I live for when people tell me that I ask a great question. So right question and best freaking question have just made my day. Just know that. I love this. Yes. Beverly says, I was having a conversation this morning about educating young immigrants and how much of the curriculum is Eurocentric and ignores your life experiences. Most standardized tests do that as well. So educational overhaul is not my wheelhouse, but as a professor, I do have the opportunity to navigate that a little bit differently. Okay.
You guys are welcome to unmute to ask a question. You also can put it in the chat if you're not feeling like you want to unmute yourself right now. I know everybody is kind of in thought right now too, and maybe processing a little bit while you're kind of digesting everything that was said. Jocelyn?
It's more of a thought. It's partly a question. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm really, really moved, and Sierra can tell you I get teary a lot, but I'm really, really moved, and I feel very blessed by your presence and your words today. They're incredibly helpful to me. I wonder if you've ever read Gregory Boyle. He's a Jesuit priest in LA, and he started this organization back in the early 80s, I think, called Homeboy Industries.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, and just your words at the very end of your talk were so much like what he says over and over and over again about reaching out to the people in the margins and sitting with them and simply including them and being with them. And I've been struggling with how to do that. And I'm not sure exactly what the answer is, but the message keeps coming in, and you're just another spirit giving me that same message. So I just wanted to throw that out there and say thank you.
I love that. Well, Jocelyn, I think at the end of the day, it's intuitive. Marginalization for me is a term I picked up in seminary, and it made so much sense because there's so much wealth in the margins, you know, that we don't tap because we got to get a little uncomfortable. Remember, we're crawling and it's uncomfortable. I use those verbs because they're intentionally uncomfortable. And so I feel like what needs to be said to you specifically is intuit your way through it.
I love that. Thank you.
Okay. And don't put pressure on you to be like, oh my gosh, I got to do so much. No. Purpose is fluid.
Okay.
And so your purpose may be one day in Starbucks to say, well, hi, how you doing? I love your hair.
Okay.
It could be just as simple and informal as that. It doesn't have to be, can you tell me about your cultural experience and let me know how I could be an ally? No, it doesn't have to be that. But I say that because some people feel like that. They're like, okay, I've got to do something. What I got to do? I got to go talk to all my Black friends. What's happening here? I got to go talk to my Asian friends. I got to go talk to my Hispanic friends. I got to talk to them. Like, I got to invite them over for dinner. Like, maybe not. Divine timing is always perfect.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. You guys are an awesome group. Yes, Miss Beverly.
Yeah, so I kind of, to piggyback off of what you just said, one of the things that I was educated on by a very dear, gracious friend of mine is that it is not her job to educate anybody on the Black experience, on the Hispanic experience, or whatever, that it is incumbent upon me. And so I've been finding myself doing a lot of that. Like, well, wait a minute, why are you, these influencers, these poor people, they're exhausted. They're exhausted just from living. So we need to just get off of our duffs and listen. They don't need to, if they want to share, great, but we have to shut up and get put back in the background and allow others to lead, allow those who have lived the experience to lead. I guess my question then really for you is how best to approach somebody when that support veers into the white saviorship.
Well, I mean, because it has veered or because it could veer?
Because when you start to see that it is beginning to veer, because I mean, let's be real. Tarana Burke certainly saw her whole movement taken over by a lot of other white people. I'm glad that it's exploded, but at the same time, the message got a little
muddled.
Weird.
Yeah.
Muddled, weird, whatever. In order to, I personally constantly monitor myself to make sure that, I'm not getting more upset than, is my role. I don't think others do the same. My question though is how best in your experience, how have you kind of kindly said, stay in your lane?
I mean, it's funny. There's a woman in the allyship group, and every time we post. So my thing is, and you're very correct. It's not incumbent upon me to teach, which is why I began to curate, information here. Read, go, report back. But that's the educator in me, right? So it's like, okay, I'm not going to teach you, but I'm going to give you resources for you to craft and your own experience. And so there's one woman in the group, and every time something's posted, oh, I can't believe there are people like this. And I'm like, it's not about you, focus. And so at the end of the day, what the question that I put to her is, what can you do beyond pity and these poor people? And, you know, any of those, when you start with any of those things in your monologue or your diatribe, if you will, it really says to me that you're rushing to get to the point of comfortability. You're not asking. So let's think about it like a relationship. Let's think about it like a husband and a wife, if we will, or a wife and a wife, whatever you do is fine with me. And let's say they're having a dispute. Okay. One of the most powerful questions you can ask your spouse or your partner is, what do you need? Like, oh my God, my day is da, 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 da. And of course, you know, I coach everything. I am a super coach, so I coach everything. And the women would say, you know, I'm trying to share with him what's going on, and he's trying to fix it. And I'm like, okay, let's develop a new ritual, because we don't do habits unless we need to break them. And so the ritual becomes, what do you need? I hear you. I honor your needs. What do you need? How do you need me to respond? As opposed to assumptively saying, oh, well, if you're tired, do you not want to cook tonight? I didn't say anything about not cooking tonight. Now we've got another argument, right? So when we assume what I call assumptive superiority, in that we know what you need, right? Do you need solutions, support, an alibi? I mean, really ask real questions. You know, what do you need? So we can navigate it from a place of satiating your need versus feigning comfort. Because we're not mutually comfortable if I'm over here going, blah, 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 and you're saying, okay, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And this works in most relationships. So asking, what do you need? Or if you see that the vision has veered or become muddled, okay, well, what do you need us to do to bring this back? See, sometimes you might end up playing the role of a governor, in that in a car, the governor, from what I understand now, I'm pretty car savvy, but I think I'm calling this thing right, where the governor assesses the speed, I think. Okay, so sometimes you're the governor, and it is your role to make sure that the vision doesn't become muddled, just by simply asking, okay, you know, let's get back to the original vision. Or if you know the visionary, hey, chief visionary, are we still on brand with your original vision? Or has it evolved in a way that is acceptable to you? And it's okay to ask that. It's okay to call that out. It's okay to crawl into that margin of, okay, we might be veering into something else, you know, the margins of thought, if you will, and say, hey, it seems like your vision may be getting pushed out. What can we do to bring it back in? And hold space for that. That's just my thoughts off the top of my head.
I like that you brought up the comfortable, you know, that people letting people sit in their discomfort. Don't take that away from them, because that discomfort is where the growth comes from. That's the mud that the lotus comes from.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that any better. Absolutely. And we do that as humans because our humanity does not like dysfunction. It does not like discomfort. It does not like misfunction. It doesn't like fear. It doesn't like sadness. It doesn't like disconnect. And so our humanity will rush to shut that down so we can get back to happiness. But our lessons are steeped in the fear, in the sadness, in the discomfort, in the misfunction, in the dysfunction. Our lessons are steeped in those things. So if we continue to push those things away, first of all, we're very much involved in self-rejection. And because I've always said, when we dishonor our feelings, we dishonor ourselves. So when we sit with that discomfort, and even if that means that, you know, when my father passed away, I'll never forget this. The day that he passed away, a friend of mine came to my mother's house because I happened to be home then. And thank you, Marcy. And we'd been friends since we were 12. My father died when I was 35. And he never said a word. He came in and just sat. I've never forgotten that. He just sat. He didn't try to fix me any food. He didn't ask me what was wrong because duh. You know, he didn't try to have meaningful conversations with me. He didn't say, oh, let's go do this. He didn't try to fix me. He just sat for hours.
Wow.
You know, and I still remember that. It's still fairly emotional for me to remember that he did that. But here's the thing. He learned it from what happened with his father, when his father's father, so his grandfather, when his grandfather died, his father had a friend that came and did the same thing. And so someone modeled sitting in discomfort for him and gave him the most fantastic gift that he could give to me, that I can now give to others. So there's something to be said for discomfort. We don't like it, but there's something there.
And for modeling.
Yes, 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 indeed. Definitely for modeling.
Well, Stephanie, this has been an incredible conversation. We appreciate you. We thank you for giving us your time today and for having this conversation with us. I know everyone is leaving with the thing they needed to hear today, I'm sure. And thank you. I will send you the link to the video later. And for all of you TWIB members, it will be available on the website. Give me a couple days, but you know, it will be up there eventually. And I invite you to leave today thinking a lot about things, because we all have a lot to talk about and think about. But Stephanie, if you need anything from us, let us know. We are a group of women that love to help and love to connect. I know Jean is going to reach out to you. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, Sierra, do I need to type the questions into the chat, or did you guys scribble those down really fast?
Type those in if you have them. Like, do you have them that you can paste? That would be fantastic. Then we can have that with the video too.
Awesome. I will do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Steph.
Oh, I'm not going to cancel the recording. Hold on. I think I'm just going to sit here and wait. Anybody can chat with me if they want. Jean, I love the Leadership Austin connection.
You know, the work that they have been doing, they've been hosting a very powerful program on diversity and inclusion. You do not have to be a Leadership Austin graduate to attend that. And they hold it about once a month. It's a 2-day seminar, and it's the woman and her group that offer it just do a fabulous job on looking at the different aspects of it. A lot of what Stephanie was talking about as far as you know, what you personally need to look at, and what you personally, your opportunities, basically your opportunities for connection. You know, I'm just going to say this. Austin is a very siloed city.
Yep.
Very siloed. And we do not have a large, I don't even know the word anymore, Black or African-American community. It's a very small percentage of our community. However, we have a very large Hispanic Latino community. And anyway, it's like, you know, the Great Divide, I-35,
that
yeah, sort of thing. So, you know, personally, I try to spend as much time as I can on the East Side with the experience of, you know, people who are living, you know, that, and then also it's like friends I've made at Leadership Austin who definitely do not look like me. Yeah. Starting with not in my age category. As you know, yeah. but that would be that training is an amazing training. And then there's a follow-up like every week or every 6 weeks for another 3 or 4 months after that. Very, very valuable as to ways that you can you know, opportunities to have access to people. You know, it's like because the truth is that the one thing that we could all do, mentor. Honest to God, that is the one thing we could all do that would make a world of difference. And because mentoring is a lot about listening.
Yep.
And the next, breaking cycles of silos is one of the big things that we can do. That's one of the biggest things I would love to explore. Actually, I have a couple of questions or conversations I want to have with you, Sierra, about TWIB and involvement. But this is one of the biggest things we can do is we can mentor.
Yeah.
Not out of a, oh, you poor person, one way or another, but out of the fact that kids need people to care about them. The kids who've never been west of I-35, it's appalling. They don't even know their city because they don't have transportation. They don't have access. Their parents are working 2 or 3 jobs. If they have 2 parents.
Austin is so, as you said, siloed and at the same time in denial of the situation, completely in denial. It's wild how you'll say to somebody like, well, Austin's pretty racist. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, when was the last time you saw a black person? Like, for real. Yeah. Coming from New York, I will go back to New York and come back here and I'm like, oh, it's so odd. Everything is English.
This is a white bread city.
Yeah.
It is a white bread city. Paul and I have talked about the one of the things that we don't like about Austin is that, I live in a neighborhood that also has all different kinds of architecture because I hate everything all the same. Yeah. I think that art and aliveness comes from the diversity.
Absolutely.
So anyway, yeah, that's, don't get me started on Austin because we are way full of ourselves here.
We are, and we're getting worse.
Yeah. 2 white girls standing in line at the frozen yogurt talking about how great it is to live in Austin. It's like everybody's excited to be in Austin. Well, tell me why. Tell me why. Because it's white, like me.
But I will say when I was there, of course at the university, I loved having, all these different people in my life. And I had white friends and I had black friends and I had Mexican friends and I had, Korean friends and whatever. But when I moved to Houston, all my friends became black. And I was like, what is this?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that was my
university is itself. The university is a microcosm of the whole world. It's one of the most diverse environments you could be in. But it's an artificial environment because people are all there for a purpose.
Correct.
And you make situational relationships.
Yeah.
That's, and not that you can't stay involved with your alum group in Houston. Right. UT alum group in Houston or whatever. But you're right. It's like, oh, at least there's more people to find in Houston.
Well, yes, there is, and I'm a part. Well, of course, we usually have Black homecoming every year, but of course, COVID has thwarted that quite well. And then, of course, there's that whole Eyes of Texas thing that just happened. That was fun. So, nevertheless, there's always something. But I think one of the reasons why I left Austin, in addition to just needing to be closer to East Texas, where I'm originally from.
Where are you from?
Lufkin.
Oh, okay. I'm from Beaumont.
Oh, yay. Okay. So when I was younger, I used to always say East Texas. Nobody knew where Lufkin was. Now people are like, oh, yeah. Okay, great. So I still haven't deprogrammed myself from saying East Texas, though. And so at the end of the day, I did get greater opportunities to do the work that especially in the marketing realm. When I was in Austin, I worked for a Black communications agency. I did internship with a Black communication agency. I worked at a Latino marketing agency, which is no longer around, I don't believe. And that was fun. But to move here and then launch my own urban marketing agency was fun. But I knew that was never going to have the type of traction that we got here in Austin. Like it just never would have happened. You know, they don't have the industry for it. So
They don't have the industry for it in Houston or in Austin?
in Austin. Yeah, they don't have the industry for it in Austin. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Right. Houston, definitely.
yes. Yes. And it was a wild ride. I can't complain. So
Well,
By the way,
yeah,
I
now
love the background.
you're right.
Background. Good job. on the
Thank you.
well, ladies, I very much appreciate it. We have the chat saved. The video will be sent. I put your link in there. They can find you everything on the link.
You're awesome. Thank
Friday
you.
afternoon. You're welcome.
Thank you, ladies. Have a beautiful weekend.
You too. Good to meet you, Stephanie.
Wonderful to meet you as well.
Okay. Talk to you soon. I will be in touch with you, Sierra.
Of course, and I'll see you Wednesday either way. So there you go.
Yeah, but I needed to talk to you anyway. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Fantastic, Jean. Bye.